Welcome, everyone. I'm Shannon Wyman, the Scientific Communications Manager at Keystone Symposia, and I'll be hosting this Meet the Editors Roundtable today. I have with me editors from Cell Press, the Journal of Experimental Medicine, PlusOne, the EMBO Journal, and Nature Reviews Immunology to discuss the state of the field, exciting new directions in innate immunology research, as well as tips on how to publish in these top-tier journals. Before we get started, I'll go through some instructions on how we will be running the session today. First, please keep your camera and microphone off during this first portion of the event. We will start with a 30-minute discussion with our panel and then open up the discussion for audience questions. You may submit your questions at any time into the Zoom chat. During the audience Q&A, I will select questions from the Zoom chat and ask the person who submitted the question to turn on their video and microphone to ask the speakers your questions live. After asking your question, you can stay on video, but please turn off your microphone once again. And please leave the Zoom chat clear for submitting questions. Okay, now I think we are ready to welcome our editors. If our editors could please join me on screen. Great. So we'll get started with having each of you tell the audience a bit about your journal and your role there. Maybe Gaia, if you would like to go first.
Yes, first of all, thank you to the organizer for this opportunity. I'm very happy to be here today. And my name is Gaia Trincucci. I'm a scientific editor at Journal of Experimental Medicine. And JEM is a nonprofit journal with a broad scope. We are mainly focused on immunology, but we publish also other type of studies on different topics. And we welcome either molecular studies or more translational studies and also human studies as well.
Great. Karin?
Yeah, so my name is Karin Dumstrei, and I'm a senior editor with the EMBO Journal. Have been an editor with the EMBO Journal for about 15 years. So the EMBO Journal pretty much publish all areas of molecular biology, and I think we always tend to have an emphasis on molecular mechanisms, and but we are a very broad journal, yeah, covering different aspects of cell biology, immunology, neurobiology, etc.
Great. And Marianne?
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here today. I'm an associate editor at PlusOne. PlusOne is an open access, multidisciplinary journal, so we have a pretty broad, inclusive scope. But we select for scientific rigor rather than perceived impact. And we also care a lot about open data and open science. It's really great to be here.
Perfect. And Salvatore?
Hi, I'm Salvatore Fabiano. I'm a scientific editor at MED, a new journal from Cell Press that is focused on clinical and translational research. So we published all across the spectrum of medical research, from diagnostic studies to pre-clinical studies to big human trials.
Wonderful. And Kirsty?
Hi everyone, I'm Kirsty Minton. I work for Nature Reviews Immunology, and thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this roundtable. So I've worked at Nature Reviews for the past, well, more than 15 years, mainly on Nature Reviews Immunology, but also I've done a little bit of work for Nature Reviews Cancer and Nature Reviews Molecular Cell Biology. So I think unlike all of the other editors on this panel, I don't handle primary research publications. I handle review articles. So my job as a senior editor is basically to commission those review articles, so to come up with ideas for topics that we would like to cover and potential authors, and then I kind of manage the whole process basically from concept of the idea through to publication. So that's kind of editorial feedback to authors, managing the peer review process, figure redrawing, right through to the finished article.
Fantastic. All right, well, to kick off our discussion today, I'd like to ask all of you, what are the most interesting, fascinating, exciting discoveries and new directions that you've heard so far in the meeting or are looking forward to hearing about over the next few days? Who wants to jump in? Marianne?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much great research going on, it's hard to choose, but I personally have always been really interested in kind of gut immunity. You know, how does this super complex system interact with, things like the microbiota and, what happens when it goes wrong to cause things like autoimmune disease. So I'm just really excited to hear about all the research from people who've been really trying to hone down the molecular interactions involved. So I've seen some really great posters on this and, some really great talks this afternoon. Particularly enjoyed Barbara Raymond's talk about the natural gut microbiota in mice. That was really cool. So
yeah,
great to see advances here.
Yeah, definitely. It's really exciting to see all the impacts and then people now teasing apart the molecular mechanisms of those. Kirsty, do you want to expand on that? I heard you agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed that talk too. I mean, I guess I kind of approach a conference like this from a slightly different perspective because I'm involved in commissioning review articles. I'm very much kind of looking for ideas for new topics that we could review in the future and, speakers that I haven't heard before who could be potential authors. So I'm kind of approaching this, very much with a perspective of which ideas would be suitable for reviews, which is probably it's not quite the same as, what's the newest hot topic. I mean, for a review article, there needs to be a kind of, significant body of work on that topic. And obviously it's very much with a kind of view of what we've already got in the pipeline of what we've already commissioned. I mean, I kind of always feel like I need a reminder for immunometabolism, no matter how many times I think I've got all these pathways straight in my head. By the time it comes to the next conference, I've forgotten the details again. So I think it's always great to, hear some of those immunometabolism talks and just kind of remind yourself of the various pathways. It's also nice to have a break from COVID related content. I feel like the last year I've read so much, COVID related stuff that it's just nice to come and hear about other stuff that's happening in the world and not all immunology is COVID related. So it's good to hear some different stuff.
Very true. Yeah, immunometabolism is so exciting right now and so much coming out, but yeah, the complexities are extreme for sure. Salvatore, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the immunometabolism. I used to be an editor of cell metabolism, and that field is always extremely complex and interesting. To me, the thing that I found really fascinating is going from the very molecular and see how it slowly translates into the clinic, but also on the way back. So yesterday we saw some data on patients with autoimmune interferopathies and seeing how from the clinical perspective, you're actually going back to trying to understand the mechanism and then going back to that again to intervene. So really the continuous progression between mechanism and clinical intervention and back, it's something that it was at the front and center to the conference. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the translational aspect is really evolving from just bench to bedside to a kind of constant collaborative effort, which is great to see.
I also enjoyed the Immuno Metabolism session today. It was some new findings that I hadn't sort of been staying on top of. As an editor, you tend to read so many different types of papers, and most of the time you sort of have seen at least vignettes of some of the talks today, but there was this session really, it has moved quite fast, and there are some interesting talks going on, and so that was really nice for me to see.
Great. Yeah, having it kind of all compiled in one coherent piece is helpful, I think. Great. And Gaia?
Yes, for me, the translational side is super interesting. I think that the field is really mature now to move towards that more and more. So I was really fascinated by all the new, targets, molecular targets that have been highlighted, or like STING agonists, targeting NETs with something that is actually an activator of something, which is actually something that inhibits. So the Vishwa's talk was really interesting also for the Gazormin side. The idea to target, different sites at what is known so far. So I think it's really cool.
Great. So more specifically, what kinds of stories are you looking for to feature in upcoming issues of your journal? More maybe molecular mechanism or clinical impact, both? If you guys could give our audience a feel for what you've got your eye out for here today. Gaia, you want to get us started with that one?
Yes, sure. So as I said, we are interested in both molecular studies. So we have like a format that is called Brief Definitive Report that can accommodate studies which are very new, that like a key, let's say, message that you want to get out to the field that is maybe not mature yet to be like in vivo setting, for example. And then we are more and more interested in the translational side. And the innate immune field is very dear to me because I trained in that field. So I hope we can recruit manuscripts in that field more and more. So the translational and human studies.
Great. Salvatore?
Yes, so MED is a new journal that Press launched to have a stronger presence in the clinical field. And we are actually publishing across, let's say, the bed-to-bench side gap. So we go from preclinical studies with the animal models to very clinical, like human trials or observational studies. We are not as focused on the mechanism as some other research journals from Cell Press are, which are more interested maybe in a new mechanistic advance. We are much more focused on therapy. So our goal when we assess the paper is to understand how that gets us closer to therapy or to changing a therapy or to improving it, or if it's maybe some biotechnological platform that is describing how that can improve the way that we approach a biological question. So really, that's like the main goal for us is to bring something to the therapeutic landscape of a certain disease with the paper.
Great. And Karin?
Yeah, so to contrast that, the EMBO Journal sort of loves mechanism. And there's lots of wonderful mechanism stories presented at this meeting. Yeah, so now we also do publish sort of more applied research, but most of our studies will have a mechanistic end to it and a mechanistic side to it. Yeah. And so that's also what I sort of look for when I look at papers for the EMBO Journal, that there's some level of mechanistic insight. Yeah.
Great. Marianne?
So I mentioned in the start, we have a very broad scope of PlusOne, and essentially any high quality science that contributes to research would be suitable for publication in the journal. I just want to highlight a couple of topics that we're especially interested in the moment. So we currently have a curated collection running on antiviral innate immunity. And this is actually the aim of this is to bring together some research on this topic from across PLOS journals. And the scope of this includes how the innate immune system counteracts viral infection, how viruses subvert these responses, and the immunopathology that may stem from the host response. So any manuscripts that kind of fall into that scope would be eligible for that collection. Another area that we're quite interested in at the moment is how any research that kind of touches on the theme of social justice. So in this field, that might be things like access to immunomodulatory drugs, potentially kind of how your working conditions might infect immune biomarkers, or kind of genetic diseases among underrepresented minority groups. And then a final initiative that I just wanted to talk about today is we recently released our new article types, which are study protocols and lab protocols. So study protocols being sort of detailed descriptions of your planned research, and lab protocols being really in detail descriptions of previously validated methodologies. And we're welcoming kind of, research on any topic in this article type would be very, very welcome at PlusOne.
Okay, great. That's a wide diversity you've got there. And Kirsty.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, most of our content is commissioned articles. So, it's people that are invited by the editors. I mean, we do accept a small number of proposals, but yeah, the majority is commissioned. So, I mean, I guess I can just talk a bit about a couple of new types of article. I mean, in response to the pandemic last year, we've started publishing lots more shorter comment type articles, which are maybe kind of 1 or 2 pages and just gave they're more opinionated, perhaps where the data's not quite so well established, which was, it was in response to the pandemic. I think the timeline for lots of our timeline for publishing a review article is typically, you know, many months. So that wasn't kind of, you know, when you're talking in a pandemic situation, that's not really kind of an appropriate time frame. So we started using these shorter comment articles to try and push stuff out quicker and allow people to express a kind of quicker opinion on, you know, particular aspects. But I think, you know, we're now they seem to be very popular, so we're now kind of looking to expand that format into non-COVID areas. And they're the kind of things that I guess you only really get by coming to conferences and chatting to people and hearing talks. It's very hard to, you know, commission a more opinionated piece just from kind of sitting in the office and reading the literature. You really need to be chatting to people and, you know, hearing people's opinions about stuff. And then the other type of article that we're aiming to do more of is called a guide to articles. So these are they're review articles, but they're aimed at a broader audience than our typical review articles. So we would aim them at anyone with a basic science background, not necessarily a immunology background. So we published, I mean, it all started, I think the first one we published was in 2016 actually, and that was Luke O'Neill, who published a guide to Immuno Metabolism, which basically kind of described all the main metabolic pathways that immunologists should be aware of. But recently we've kind of reinvigorated that, and we published a guide to vaccination by Andrew Pollard in December last year, which was obviously, you know, it came out at the time that the COVID vaccines were starting to be approved. So I think that proved very popular with a kind of more general audience who wanted to just know the basics of how the different types of vaccine work, what's in them, what they're doing once they get into your body. So yeah, I think we're going to, we published another one on cancer immunotherapies by Mike Leonardo, which is obviously again a topic that's very kind of broad general interest. General population wants to know about these kind of things. So I think we're planning to do more of that type of article in the future, that kind of, you know, more sort of basic explainers of key topics in immunology to a broad scientific audience.
Great. Well, I'd like to remind our audience that they can start submitting their questions into the Zoom chat as we approach our 30-minute mark. We're going to open up to audience questions. And then the final question for me will be for our audience members. I'm sure they're looking to publish their work, whether now or very soon. What advice do you have for them for submitting to your journal to improve their chances of acceptance? Salvatore, do you want to start us off with that one?
I have, I think, two main items that I always make sure to mention. The first one is the cover letter. I think that particularly as you're submitted to a broad scope journal, it's important to use the cover letter to mention everything that would be good to know about the paper that is not in the paper. So from conflicts of interest, if you're aware that a related work is ongoing in a different lab, or maybe another manuscript has been submitted, but also trying to, let's say, convince the editor that this paper is answering an important question for the field, or pointing out something that maybe missed through the manuscript. For instance, that this is the first time that we look at this particular cohort of individuals, or this side of the question has never been addressed before. So really the cover letter is not just a broader or like longer version of the abstract. Is really the moment where the authors have all our attention before we actually start looking at the data. And then the second thing that I always make sure to mention, because I still have whiplash from my days doing research, is to do not format the paper before submitting. Just send it to us as it is, especially now that people are uploading their manuscript on bioRxiv. Maybe they just write it in the format that is more convenient to them, and then they're worried about sending it to a journal or another because of different format requirements. At Cell Press as a whole, we are format agnostic at the initial submission. That's a lot of time that gets wasted changing figures in the manuscript. So please do not do that. We can talk about that later on.
Okay, great. That's some great advice. Gaia, do you want to go next?
Yes, so in terms of submitting, so if anybody has doubts in terms of the scope, if the topic would fit the scope, so we always welcome pre-submission inquiries, but also in terms of it's always good to talk with the editors. So if people want to discuss a study before submitting it, we always, especially now that it's very hard to have a quick chat at the conference about something. It's always nice to have a chat with the authors if they think they need some feedbacks from us. So please reach out. So we are not like in a ivory tower that we cannot really be reached anymore. So please talk to us. It's always nice to discuss with authors. Yes.
Yeah, I think sometimes editors seem very daunting to scientists as the make it or break it of their research. But as you can see, they're very approachable here and are here to help you get your work published, not hurt you. So definitely reach out to them. Marianne.
Yeah, so I mentioned at the start that we are big fans of open science at PlusOne. So I would say when submitting, just always keep in mind kind of what this is all about, really, which is like reproducibility. So, obviously we're an open access journal, which is sort of like the cornerstone of open science, but it also applies into thinking about how you're writing your methods and analyses, and really, making sure that it's crystal clear why you did what you did and how you did it so that another researcher could replicate it. I would say look very carefully at our open data policy and make sure that you're happy to comply with that. And also, because we don't select based on significance, we really, really want our authors to not try and overstate their conclusions. You don't have to kind of sell to us. We just want your conclusions to really be supported by your data. And kind of the point of all of this is that you guys really want to get your research out there, and we really want to help you to get it out there and make sure that it's accessible. But we also want to help you to make sure that it's transparent and reproducible as possible, so that it can really just have the biggest impact that it can.
Great. And Karin?
Yeah, so I sort of want to echo some of the points, like, for example, the formatting issue. I keep hearing that from authors, that formatting is so important and takes up time. But to be honest, I don't think any journal editors ever really care about the format. As Salvatore said, this was something you can do down the line, yeah? Also, what Gaia said, editors are actually incredibly approachable and love to talk science and love to discuss science. So if you ever have any questions, just contact an editor and we'll be happy to just discuss via email or Zoom with paper or manuscript. So don't be afraid of getting in touch with an editor. For me, the cover letter is probably not so important, but that's just the style of how I read papers. But as you can hear, it's important for some editors. So to phrase a cover letter in a good way is, of course, important. Yeah, but it varies about how editors read the paper. So the biggest hurdle that authors have is getting past the editor. To get it sent out for full review. And I think it's probably the same for my colleagues here, yeah? So, the editor makes a decision if the paper should be sent out for full review, and the different journals, there are different numbers, yeah? But that is sort of the biggest step you have to conquer first before. Once a manuscript is sent out for a full peer review, at least at the EMBO Journal, you have a good chance of getting through the system. It is just at the EMBO Journal, we have a very strong pre-selection criteria. So I think once you've sent out for full review, you have about a 50% chance of being accepted in the first place, yeah? And so this is sort of the whole aim of this pre-selection, that we're trying to save time in the overall run. For tips for authors, in the end, it comes down to your project, yeah? If you have an exciting project, you will probably not have a big time, or you select the journal, then the process will be smooth, yeah? So my best advice I can give to students is that to select a project that you really feel excited about, because it will help everything down the line with getting it published, with doing the experiments that you like to do, yeah? And approach editors and ask questions. So that's sort of the best I can tell you, yeah.
Great. And Kirsty?
Just to echo everyone else's comments, that we're all very approachable and like to chat, and I certainly love to receive feedback about the journal. So, please don't hesitate to get in touch if you've got any comments on, topics that you think we should be covering and that we haven't covered recently. I mean, as I said, most of our content is commissioned, but we do you know, we're also happy to receive proposals, and they can be submitted through our online system. I would say if you are interested in submitting a proposal, then kind of have a careful look at not only what we have published recently, but what, you know, other journals have published in the way of reviews. I mean, we do, and I think it's unavoidable. Obviously, we don't know all the time what other journals have in their pipeline, but we do certainly try to avoid, to the best of our ability, publishing multiple reviews on very similar topics. I don't think that kind of does anyone any favors. So yeah, I'd say if you've got an idea for a review, then, you know, please do get in touch, either if it's something you want to write yourself, or, you know, just an idea for a topic that you'd like to read a review on that you think we should be covering, then, you know, happy to receive any suggestions.